Many Nigerians are of the opinion that military regime in Nigeria is far better than the democracy we are currently operating today in Nigeria. Today, a prominent Nigerian by the name Chris Moghalu, he has been a presidential candidate once, and he was also a CBN, MD at a time. All right. Now, this guy said, we don't have democracy in Nigeria. He said what we have is only a rotation, right, of going to a conducting election of every 4 years, okay, just to show up. But we don't actually operate democracy in Nigeria. And he went as far as praising military regime that is far better than democracy. This is not coming from only Ghost, so this is coming from, I've said it time without number, and I brought that fact, especially in 2023, how military regime in Nigeria, better a million times the lives of Nigerians than the democracy criminal entity we are operating today. Guys, if you beware for Nigeria, if you are upset with what our politicians are doing today, our politicians are only after food, chop, take what they can take, you are upset at it, please like this video right now so that Facebook and YouTube can recommend it. Please share, let the world see. God bless you. I'll see you in my next video. Thank you.
We should ask ourselves whether what we are practicing in the first place is democracy, or whether we have elections every 4 years. There's a difference between the two. When you talk about democracy, you're talking about also democratic institutions, which include the judiciary, other institutions of government functioning as independent institutions. So that's a very important point. The other question that we should also ask ourselves, since we're rounding up, is democracy an end in itself, or is it a means to an end? Do you have a real democracy on an empty stomach? If you have democracy and people are so poor that they cannot feed, but you have maybe what you might call a military dictatorship, many of the countries of Asia were not built as democracies. Their economies were built by military dictators. But those dictators were visionary dictators. There's a difference between a visionary and benign dictatorship, and a dictatorship such as we've had in Africa that has tended to concentrate power in the hands of the military. Now, let's come back to General Babangida in closing. He was a very visionary president. Whatever you might disagree on some things, but he was visionary. He used a lot of intellectuals. He ruled with ideas and, elevated people who had ideas. What is our politics today? In our politics today, if you speak about ideas, they will say you're blowing grammar. That Bobo is just blowing grammar. So the quality of our democracy is going down, and we think we're practicing democracy. Look at the politicians. Yes, it is through the voter education process and through this matter of who are we as Nigerians. What is our worldview? What is our national philosophical foundation? We don't know who we are. We don't know where we have come from. We don't know where we are going. How can we come together in a democratic process if you have not addressed that basic question? And that comes back to the issue of leadership. Whoever has the responsibility today must be made to know that you must begin to lay this foundation and hand over the baton. We cannot wait forever until some messiah shows up. It doesn't work that way.
The political parties have not been able to help themselves to achieve the internal party democracy, and they are now allowing the judiciary to clean up the dirty mess they've left for themselves. And that's why, whilst other climes and jurisdiction will talk about political questions coming from party issues, the judiciary in Nigeria is invited to complain. So whether parties have complied with their constitution, whether they've been able to conduct their elections, whether they've been able to conduct their primaries the way they ought to conduct them, amongst others. These are so many issues that the court has been invited to intervene, and that takes them, going by the electoral law, takes them about 180 days. And you can imagine the time frame wasted in trying to clean up what the political parties have not been able to achieve on their own. But going into the main issue of post-election disputes, I believe that the judiciary, they fared fairly well, because what would have been the contrary is that it will be resort to violence or mob action or anarchy, as the case may be. But because of the intervention of the judiciary, I believe that it has helped to stabilize the polity to a very large extent, because people now feel that win or lose, agree or not, they have an option, and the option is to go before the judiciary. And what have the judiciary been able to achieve? They've been able to have a blend of both technical and substantial justice. They've been able to rigorously interpret the electoral laws and the constitutions as it affects election. They've also been able to ensure that where parties are announced or candidates are announced in a way and manner they ought not to be, that it can be reversed. But the question you have posed is quite germane, in the sense that, is it really in the place of the judiciary to make a final proclamation in such a dispute, instead of invalidating it and calling for a fresh election? Is it in the place of the judiciary ultimately to announce another candidate? I believe that seems to be the issue that is bothering a lot of people, especially Nigerians. As far as the electoral law and the constitution are concerned, yes, the judiciary are right there, but one would have preferred a situation where, after such a vigorous interpretation of the law, the Supreme Court or any of the courts intervening can simply declare that the election is invalidated and there should be a fresh election. So to that extent, we will now question the correctness or otherwise of some of those pronouncements. We know of some of the recent cases around the country and some other areas where people have questioned the Supreme Court in that regard, whether it is in their place to announce a candidate who obviously may not have come first, second, or third as the rightful winner of an election, instead of nullifying or invalidating that election. So the challenges are there, but give and take, we cannot rule out the fact that the judiciary has done well, and the jurisprudence of the Supreme Court of Nigeria is quoted extensively all over the world, in Africa, South Africa, and so on and so forth. But again, another issue is that the electoral laws seem to have made things a little bit more cumbersome. Kenya has including the new electoral law, because we question the fact that people, after months or years after the election, an election can now be nullified. And we have not seen it in many other places. We have not seen it in US, even Kenya. Odinga has just gone to court in Kenya, and the Supreme Court of Kenya is giving about 14 days for the case to be heard and disposed of, even before the inauguration of the president. We should be thinking of how we can achieve that, so that we can create the scenario whereby we can have the election and all the candidates put in place before the inauguration, anytime, whether it is in May or otherwise. So we have to be looking at that to see how we can correct that imbalance, because it does not seem to be working very well for our system. Thank you.
All right then, Professor Moghalu, you're going to have the final word here, because we're completely out of time.
Thank you. Then on democracy, I've had views that appear contradictory. We want to zone what? Zone the right to serve. It is your turn to do what? There are some implied self-interest in all of that. And the one provocative question I want to make is that people must understand that to be a technocrat doesn't make you competent leader. The qualities of leadership don't flow from classroom. And I want to repeat that. And that is why sometimes in US, both Republican and Democrat, if you watch CNN at the eve of the elections, they will say they have challenges getting an electable material. To be electable is not necessary to be educated, to be a professor, to be a technocrat. There are other leadership abilities. And I think one of the things IBB taught us is that
you can unite the country by going around the 36 states and FCT. You will find competent, able technocrats to manage different aspects of the Nigeria polity, society, and economy. You don't have to be president to contribute. And that is why if anybody can have a compendium of those who play different responsible roles, policy-making roles in Nigeria or the IBB, you will find that virtually all the 774 local government can point to somebody who was appointed on account of what value it can add. So I want to salute you for bringing this, for organizing this thing, because we don't really celebrate leaders until they are no more. It's nice to be celebrated when you are around. As a union man, we had a opportunity to interact with IBB, and there are a few things I learned. If he doesn't get an answer for you, he creates a platform to keep talking while he is taking of the answer. So he's not elected, he's not bound to allow conversation. He can decree, as military always do, I decree as follows. And it's a law. But the country was encouraged to debate and debate and debate. And to be honest, not to debate. We are all somehow guilty. So I want to appeal to the panelists, because when I listen to people talk about it, I spent all my life until I became a governor interrogating power, questioning some of the decisions. And one of the IBB legacies, I'm not sure I agree with it or I don't agree, but he was a thinker. He believed that government cannot continue to run everything and set up TCPC or whatever it was to do privatization of what can be privatized, and government hold on what it can do best. Every other government has tinkered with privatization, even though some did it in a manner that is absolutely embarrassing, like the way the distribution companies were handed over to people who know next to nothing. So families were had to handle it. So they did the privatization, but not in the manner that it was conceptualized and as provided for in the enabling act that set up the privatization.
All right.
So, short man, short speech. I want to thank you for the opportunity. But I thought that
please put your hands together.
knowing that IBB encouraged people of diverse background. Other IBB's economic team, you have Professor Aboyade, a seasoned conservative.
Yeah.
There you have Izemiro, tech communist. And then you have, between the two extremes, you have the liberals. So you have engagement, not in terms of Igbo, Yoruba, Hausa, in terms of policy choices. And I think the media, I'm happy two of you are their channels and Arise.
Yes, sir.
You should also help. When people bring religion, shut it down and play up issues. Like you can notice, each time you ask, what is the solution? You don't get loud voices. What is the problem? Everybody shouting. We all know it. So when people come and ask you, where is this man from who wants to be governor? Where is this man from what? Tell them that is not what matters.
Thank you very
What
much.
matters
sir.
is what will he do differently so that we stop lamenting and stop moving forward. Stop agonizing and start organizing. Nigeria will go on. I'm not here to lament. We have a future. And my children must have a future.
And
It's a
that's a
duty
good place
that we
to-
must perform.
I've listened attentively to the discussion of the panelists, but I think the missing link here is we are discussing about addressing the problems of this country and talking about the future. And I think the future should be education. Because if there is any legacy left for us by the colonialists, is education. And if we interrogate today, where is education in Nigeria? It remains a very big question. Therefore, I think it is about time all stakeholders in this country come together to try to see how we bring an end to the endless crisis in the educational system, especially the ASU strike. Because as I speak here, I am a victim of ASU strike. I spent 9 years in the university, so instead of 5 years.
To God be the glory forever and ever. Amen. The chairman of this very unique occasion, ladies and gentlemen, I want to appreciate the presentation by my lecturer, Professor Jibo, and the panelists. I appreciate your intellectual sagacity. I just want to quickly make this very short intervention that when I was growing up as a child, houses had no fences in Kano, even in the GRAs. What I'm trying to pull out is that the problem of this country, from the elucidation from every panelist up there, is because of the breakdown of value system. When I was growing up in Kano, houses had no fences even in the GRAs, but the value system became devalued. We started building fences. Growing up as a child, the only place I see fences is either a zoo or a prison yard. Gradually, the situation deteriorated. We started having tall fences. It further deteriorated. We started having broken bottles of minerals as barriers on our fences. It further deteriorated. We started having barbed wire. Today, it is electric fence. From the wear of dogs, we now have the wear of hyena, the wear of lions, showing how the entire society have become depleted. The Holy Book says, bring up a child in the way of the Lord, and when he grows up, he will not depart from it. It is our orientation from the family unit level that has completely broken down. And this have not been, it's not an advantage, because all our curriculum from primary school to university do not support system. If you see an American child at age 5, he can tell you about the dream of America. That's why when they are singing their national anthem when playing football, you see some of them crying. Because at a kindergarten level, you are taught nationalism. You are taught civic education. You are taught moral philosophy. Even as a child, you already know what it takes to be an American and what it takes to protect America. The only social orientation we have in our education curriculum is social studies. And what does it teach? It teaches you about Jaja of Ogbobo, Awolowo of Western Nigeria, Azikiwe of Eastern Nigeria, and Sadona of Northern Nigeria. And even as a child, you are already indoctrinated with ethnic consciousness. So we must go back. We cannot get it right, whether electoral, political, or economy, once we don't have the right attitude, the right values, and the right orientation. Nobody teaches you about Nigeria today. Today, history has been taken away from our curriculum in secondary school. It's no longer there. No more vocational studies. No more technical drawing. All the technical schools and colleges are down. These are primary values that we must go and resuscitate. No matter the grammar we speak here, no matter the policy direction we give, once we do not have the right attitude to manage whatever policy, manifesto, or ideology, we will not get there. So my advice is we need to go back to the basics. This attitudinal change is the primary thing. Because if you don't even know your country, you don't even know how to divide your country. When I was growing up, there's no Hausa, there's no Yoruba. When it was Christmas, I can tell the streets up to the 20th street after my street in Kano, we share rice, and during Salah, we also get tuwo shinkafa. Today, I don't even know who is my immediate neighbor in Metama. These are the value systems that we need to get back to. There is no Boko Haram or bandit today who no human being will pick up a gun and shoot a fellow human being if you're not under influence. Drugs have taken over all our young ones, and the attendant satanic manifestation is what we are getting. So let's get back to the basics, go back to family unit reorientation, then we start from there before we can get to all these big grammar level. Thank you and God bless you.
I agree with Dino Melaye's submission 100%, so I don't need to address it. Let me speak to His Excellency, former Governor Oshiomhole, on the matter of zoning. I want to make an important clarification. Everybody here knows that I have offered myself in the past and was a presidential candidate in the 2019 election. And even in the 2023 cycle, I also offered myself in the context of my political party, but did not get the ticket for reasons that my resignation letter from the political party stated very clearly, and which was what Dr. Babayo was referring to. And the reality is that many political parties, especially the smaller ones, that many of us had thought would be effective counterweights to the APC and the PDP, because we were not happy with what people saw as political corruption in APC and PDP, and so we decided to try alternative vehicles. I can tell you flat out that many of these parties are worse than the big parties we complain about. Let me explain. They're worse because Henry Kissinger once said that the reason that the politics of the academia is so vicious. Remember that Henry Kissinger was a professor at Harvard and then later became the National Security Advisor and Secretary of State of the United States. And so, reflecting on his time in academia, he said, the reason the politics of the academia is so vicious is precisely because the stakes are so small. Maybe people are fighting to death about who will become the head of department. Maybe people are fighting to death about who will control some research grant, right? So extrapolate this to the national political situation and you will get what I'm saying. Many of these parties, not all, I'm not saying all, but many, they're not even serious about winning elections. Certainly not the presidential election. The reason some of them exist is simply to become trading platforms, either aligning with the big parties or taking money from candidates, but they're not serious about fielding competitive candidates for elections. They're just looking, yes, they're either surrogates or party officials are looking for who will bring money to them in order to get the ticket, and if you don't, they can bypass you and pick people that other people can objectively look at and say, was this really the best choice? Do you understand what I'm saying? So this is the point that I was trying to make concerning that particular issue about our democracy. Many of our political parties are not serious. They are not in this to win. It's a trading, it's a hustle for them. And so then what makes them better than APC or PDP? We complain about APC and PDP. Yeah, 100 million naira fund. It's a matter of scale. In some parties, the fund may be 20 million or 15 million or 30, but the same issue is taking place. So, but that's by the way. Let me address the matter of zoning very briefly. And the reason I brought up my own experience is because I made it very clear that I'm not offering myself to be president of Nigeria based on where I come from. My politics was never ethnic. I was seeking to be president because of a vision that I have for this country. But that is not inconsistent with the matter of equity and social justice. I've finally landed. Now, this matter of equity and social justice, there was a study by Harvard University in 2002 called fractionalization. That study empirically proved that where there is a heterogeneous environment, the more heterogeneous it is, the more fractionalized the country is. And they showed by empirical study that Japan and the two Koreas are the two most homogeneous countries in the world. And that European countries were also highly homogeneous in their composition. But that African countries tended to be the most heterogeneous countries on earth. Empirically proved. And that is one of the reasons why in Africa there is a lot of division. And democracy can, if it is not very well managed, contribute to fractionalization. How do you solve that? You can develop a democracy that suits your own local environment. And that is where this zoning matter came up. You also have to look at the matter of constitutional restructuring, because the only way you manage a big, diverse federal state is through a federal system. And that's why you see America, it's federalism, Australia, Canada, Germany, Brazil, India, so many countries that are big and also have heterogeneous populations tend to be federal states. But in Nigeria, we are running away from the matter of constitutional restructuring. Then we're not serious. So that's why we must come back to that matter. And then we must come back to the matter of zoning. In the matter of constitutional restructuring, we can look at, it's a debate. We can look at, should the presidency, for example, rotate across the 6 geopolitical zones? Switzerland is a confederation. The presidency rotates every 2 years to every one of the 26 cantons in Switzerland. Are you more developed than Switzerland, that recognizes the fact that they are French Swiss, there are Italian Swiss, there are German Swiss, and then you have the Romanced. So in Nigeria, we tend to, I don't believe in running away from issues.
Let me say, today has been a day. I will give a meaning before I drop. The celebrant, distinguished visionary leader, a father, an elder statesman, the chairman of the occasion, and his wife, distinguished senior sons and daughters of Nigeria, particularly General Moghalu and General Akilu, senators serving and retired, former governors, senators or members of national and state assemblies here present, fellow brothers and sisters here present as candidates and running mates, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, to me, it is an honor to be here. It is an honor indeed at this point in time for me to have emerged as a candidate of my own party, Action Alliance. And then on the second hand, the invitation to honor this occasion of a leader that we saw at work in peacetime and in crisis time. But let me say in a nutshell, that for the number of years some of us were exposed, seeing his work at a close range, we know he was a school to seniors and juniors. He was a school to many elders across Nigeria and indeed African leaders. Let me start with one tiny little one. I was virtually working hard to grow mustache at that age when in 1985, and I'm referring to the services rendered helpless by the likes of General Akilu in holding the country tight. Things were difficult. Everywhere was gloomy. But resilience and sheer style of real leadership kept him to close all aspects of fears or threats or anything that will disturb the entire country from knowing the true state of the country. He kept it himself with the support of the likes of such leaders that do not like to be talked about in public. General Akilu, I beg your pardon, sir. At that time, Nigeria was on the verge of catching fire in the true sense of it. One day, there was a meeting and we were privileged to have been part of those that accompanied members of National Security Council then. When President Babangida came out, he was visibly talking to himself. This is a moment I can never forget. It has a big meaning to me in the sense that when he came out, service chiefs of that time were already outside. But soliloquy, indeed, he was saying, and I quote, he said, everything will sort itself by time. It was strange. That's why some of us, toddlers as we were, we had to climb that. It looked nothing to an ordinary person, but looking at the situation in Nigeria and looking at this sentence or this statement, it meant so much. I went on research even as a toddler, only to discover something that most great nations worked upon in achieving greatness. That is to say, there is no end to possibilities in the life of man, in the life of nations. That statement was is an open gate of knowledge that you cannot learn nowhere. Between rhetorics and academics and realism of threats or challenges of power management are two different worlds apart. It was up until he made that statement that I got to know numerous events about many countries that rose up to have become the greatest countries on earth. And I cannot thank him enough. Second was when at a later date or years after that event, another thing happened in Nigeria. The executive convener was a small lady who liked to take car and run around the presidency then, but didn't know what was going on. The president had another serious challenge. Lives were lost. All I'm trying to say here is the fact that he faced challenges in 1990, and may also rest in peace, the former First Lady, who, from the events of that time that I do not want to go deep into, but drawing at the lesson I want to mention, is to say that the event of that time brought fear, direct, looking for lives. But then some of us were, in a way, God Almighty used in taking some risk that worked. Now, the siblings of
Sorry,
the...
you have a minute, sir. Thank you very much.
Either, if you say 2 minutes, I thought you are referring to African 2 minutes. The relevance of what I'm talking about, I think are important for you to consider one more African minute. Now, finally, let me say that out of numerous events that had happened during his tenureship are exactly what all of you have summarized. That's all I'm trying to say. You have summarized his legacies, and most of you are going deeper into it, and you are looking at him differently. If his legacies were to be discussed in 1993, shortly before he left office, we wouldn't have gotten these details. Here is a country full of intellectuals who in most cases totally robotic, seeing the left side of the person that is in power. That's all I'm trying to say. Now today, if President Babangida is to contest 2023 election, from the summaries you have all given from the guest speaker to the panelists, to all the speakers we have heard since morning, it shows he is much more needed now in Nigeria than before.
Fantastic.
And finally, that is to say, when Nigeria sit in retrospect, examine our flaws and achievements of yesterday, it is certain that will be the beginning for us realizing who we are. If there is no national retreat, we will not understand who we were. And one of the major challenges is the fact that there are too many actors in one particular scene and at a particular time. What you see is dust and rowdiness and no result or direction for us to see. I'm confident this country will be different. I'm confident the schools we have heard from him that we are celebrating today, I think there is so much from knowledge and wisdom that will drive us through. We are in Action Alliance, privileged to be here, but we know most of the legacies he left in office and from the tower of wisdom he occupies today, we are tapping from it, and we are sure that and many more that we have garnered will present in us the qualities required of Nigeria at this point in time. And finally, so that you wouldn't raise. In most cases, you used to hear countries like America giving Nigeria a certain period of time for the country to break. Let every intellectual open his brain and think deeper. All they are telling you is that by your actions, either in power or outside power, the elites are always in your sayings and actions busy promoting causes of insurgency. But the resilience of the poor man, of him that is on the street, is actually what is keeping Nigeria. For example, the panelists as you are, how many of you, from whichever part of the country you are, pick telephone to call the other from the other side in discussing Nigeria's security, welfare, and well-being? You haven't, but you have accused leaders. And I'm sure you haven't. Most calls are from personal interest, not national interest, not Nigeria's unity, security. So if we have to keep Nigeria together, challenge leadership from the point of view of four things. When you are looking at Nigeria from home and from the international scene, Nigeria's security, economy, Nigeria's relevance, the word relevance and all it takes. And finally, Nigeria's participation within Committee of Nations, regaining its own true state of power. So when we are pointing accusing fingers at some, we should also examine the other side before we pronounce. I, on behalf of my party and the party leadership of Action Alliance, are conveying our birthday felicitations to the leader that, to me, saw it all. Tested, tried, survived, with full of knowledge. And one real thing he did was courage. The word courage of all qualities of leadership. And that's where, not only in Nigeria, but around the world, history has recorded numerous failures of leadership where the word courage is missing. Among qualities of leadership that we examine a particular leader with is the capacity to carry all alone